stage, and then word is right should be an option. And if not, I can, okay, fabulous.
It's live. Right. What is drag poetry? Drag poetry is revival, a testimony to healing that requires wig heels, bulges, and beards. Drag poetry is fashion, a rainbow accessory for any runway that requires good taste and execution. Drag poetry is writing, a tucking arrangement of words that requires Mike reciting on stage. Drag poetry is love, a celebration of identity that requires repeating, I am fabulous. And that opening poem is by Robert Fleming, and it is out of the Out Loud LGBTQ anthology with Red or Green Books. Please get yourself a copy. It is an amazing compilation of work from LGBTQ plus members. And this is the Out Loud podcast, April 1st, National Poetry Month. And I have a few guest hosts with me today. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves, please. Justin.
Hello, I'm Justin Douglas, calling in from New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So hello, everyone.
Thank you. And Rachel.
Hey, Justin.
I am Rachel. I am calling in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm excited to be here.
And
Hey,
Marissa,
Rachel.
our matriarch over here at The Word is Right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Out Loud. We're so glad to have you here at The Word is Right. I am Marissa Prada. I am the co-founder and creative director here at Word is Right, and also the founder of Red or Green Books. We published Out Loud, the literary art anthology, in 2022, and it has a bunch of incredible poets and artists from all over the world in there. And this show is designed to celebrate everything LGBTQ, to create a brave space. We don't say it's a safe space because we can't guarantee anyone's safety, but we can guarantee that this is a brave space to talk about lots of different things each month. And I really, really thank Shockie G for continuing to carry the torch of this really incredibly important show, really incredible, important topics that we talk about each month. And especially with everything that's happening in the world, more spaces like this are necessary. And I see Starchild is joining us. Welcome, Starchild. Rich Boucher is joining us as well. So we're just getting started, and I will let Shockie go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. And as Morgan gets settled, welcome, Rich. And yeah, let's go. Let's have a good time today.
Yes. Hello to those who just joined. So today we are speaking about the anti-trans and anti-drag legislation that has been whipping through America. But first, I want to talk.
Just, I'm on it. Oh, whoops. My bad. I'm sorry, y'all.
Okay. So I have two questions that I'm going to pose to you guys before we get into the meat of the conversation. And the first one comes from a quote from Socrates, and he said, "A just man is a happy man," obviously using the royal man as in humanity, not just men. Do you all think that humans need to be governed? And what's your take on that? Feel free to just unmute with your response. Don't be scared.
I'm writing this quote down real quick. A just man is a happy man. So, I don't really know the anthropomorphological history of necessarily man or civilization or how we came to be where we are as a species, as a people. But I think that there are way too many human beings physically. The number is just so massive on this earth that if there was no law and order, if there was no way to move the masses of people from point A to point B as safely and as easily as possible, while making sure that everyone is, well, we can't say everyone, right? Because there's a lot of people who don't have these things, but food, water, shelter, warmth, dry, warm, right? All the things that were required to sustain life, to make sure that homeostasis in our life is maintained. There has to be, I think, some sort of governing body. Now, by saying governing body, we're not saying government. Okay, we're saying that there has to be some semblance of laws of nature, if you will, because Darwinism is very real. If, for example, if someone took out the grid, the electric grid in the United States, or took out all the satellites and we had no way of communication with each other, and there were no traffic lights, and there were no phone calls, and there was no electricity for refrigeration, there was no way to clean our water, there was no way to get rid of sewage, right? If those things, you know, basic human needs, fresh water, fresh food, housing, warmth, right, cleanliness, medication, right, how would it affect our medication? If we didn't have some sort of system for that, Darwinism would ensure that it would very much so be a catastrophic loss to mankind. So yes, I think we need to have some sort of order or system, and that system only works if there are consequences for not following the system. Like, you know, you can't just go around shooting people, but hey, it happens in this country without consequences. And well, maybe you can, right? Texas and Florida, you totally can. But a just man is a happy man. Like if you can sleep at night knowing that, you know, you're not harming someone, then you can sleep and be a happy person. But mankind has kind of evolved to think that the world owes mankind. And there's a lot of ego and temper, and if people had a free for all to just go kill whoever they didn't like, it would be a very dangerous thing. So we have to have some sort of law and rules to govern that. I don't know, maybe this is not the direction you wanted to go, Shockie.
I kind of
Yeah, I'm just asking
actually
questions.
like,
So I'm gonna go a different direction because I'm an anarchist, but not entirely because
Starchild, your audio is not coming in.
Oh no, they froze. And you know, Starchild and I and some other poets, we've talked in the past about like having a commune, like, you know, like a community of poets, for example, where everyone's part of the system, but it's still a system, right? Everyone has a role to play. So even if you were to do, you know, have your own community, the community would still have expectations and would still have assignments, and you would still have to do, you know, contribute, right? And not be part of the problem. You have to be part of the solution. So even in an anarchist type of rule, there is, you know, there's still to be order and function to things.
right. And if you kind of take it in a different viewpoint, it's almost like a just man is a happy man. You kind of look at it in a different viewpoint of, you know, we're kind of talking, and a lot of the LGBT laws come into religion, right? So a lot of people that
yes,
we
yes,
kind of
exactly.
always have this viewpoint of whenever there wasn't religion, we were introducing religion. It was because we were seeking for some kind of purpose. And if we can't be our true self, a happy man, we start looking for other governing factors, which, you know, in historic things was more of the religion. And I think if we could be our true selves, we wouldn't have to have that governing factor, and we wouldn't have all this depression and other things that we're currently facing in society. So I do like that quote. So I think we could be just people if we could live our true selves, and we didn't have all these laws telling us what we should and shouldn't do. Because, you know, I don't think we had all this crime until today, where we're having people tell us how we should live our lives.
And there's so many people though, right? Like, what are if humankind maybe wasn't so massively populated, right? I mean, you look at places like New York City. I mean, small micro communities, you know, smaller places, small towns, small town USA, they do very well, right? Having minimal amounts sometimes of governing. But the globe as a whole, like the
Well,
macro,
we're starting to see that now. Like the small towns are starting to have the small issues, right?
Yeah.
Because kids are realizing now, like, you know, I don't want to be this person. You know, now we're starting to see mental health issues in places like West Virginia, where they have 3 times the suicide rates in other states because we're, you know, they're the most governed. They have the most laws in place, and they're turning over things because kids can't be their true self. Sorry, that might
And
be
Justin, I
too deep.
I agree with you that you know, we're afraid to be ourselves because of what could happen to us. And you know, my son, for example, he just turned 15. I'm happy that he is who he is and he came out as who he is. And so is he, but he's also afraid to come out because, you know, to certain people because of their religious affiliations, and he doesn't want them to come down on him. And I told him, I said, you know, you just be you. Who cares what they say or think? Now, if they try causing problems or, you know, retaliating or, you know, trying to hurt you, then yeah, you let me know and there's going to be a big problem here. But yeah, I do agree that, you know, it's hard that we can't be ourselves just out of fear.
well, and it's also survival, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely goes back to Darwinism. Like my 13-year-old
Definitely.
daughter, she would run the streets if I let her do whatever the hell she wanted. But I know that where we live is a dangerous place. Specifically, this city sometimes can be very dangerous. Where we live in the city sometimes can be dangerous. She can't walk here at night after dark.
Yeah.
Because she will get scooped up and killed. So, you know, part of that not being allowed to necessarily embrace your authentic self or be as free as you want is because you also don't want harm to come to your offspring. You don't want harm to come to yourself or those you love. That's a very real issue we face as parents and friends and family.
Yeah.
Rich, your hand was raised. I'm sorry, Shockie. I don't want to step on toes. I didn't want to not validate his question or whatever he has.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, thanks. And thank you, Shockie, for doing this. Thank you, Marissa, as well. So I jotted down the question as fast as I could. And I think the question was, should humankind be governed? That was the question, right? My answer is yes, it should. If there are no laws that state that my neighbor cannot just come over to my home and take what I worked really hard to buy, something that I worked busted my ass in a job for so that I could have the money to buy my thing, and my neighbor decides, well, I don't get to have it for whatever reason he's thinking of, that's unacceptable to me. There has to be laws that state that he can't do that. And if we go to a place where there are no laws, then depending on how hard I worked for the item that I bought, that's going to determine how exactly I retaliate against somebody coming to take my belongings and possessions that I worked really hard for. You know, that's my point of view of it.
Okay, so I have 2 rebuttals to your answers. First, it was a conversation that I was having with people about indigenous tribes, and what they were saying was, what did they do prior to technically the white man's law coming to America? And the answer was to get to the root cause of the issue. So for example, if someone is stealing, right? Why are they stealing? Well, they don't have their basic needs met. Or it could be a pride issue, not wanting to ask for help, things like that, and fixing that need, finding ways to make sure that those issues are not coming up within the society, that everyone has their basic needs met, has healthcare, has access to resources, things like that, which I thought was interesting. But on the flip side, I also think about the Stanford prison experiment, and I'm sure you guys have heard of it, where they took a number of just common people off the street and broke them up into prisoners and prison guards. And they actually had to stop the experiment because the people who were placed as prison guards began to be abusive towards the prisoners. for no reason, just other than the fact that they were given power over these people, and they just increasingly became more and more and more abusive. And so with the answers that you guys gave, it brings up, and the word came up a few times, where does morality come from, right? Some people look at religion and other places. For you guys, when we're saying conversation of government and thinking about how the trans laws and things are going right now, where does morality come from? Who is responsible for morality?
I want to
I
just touch
think,
on this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Starchild. While you're.
oh, cool. I have audio. Yay. So like, bottom line for me is like, it comes from attuning to the energy of the people around you. And so when you're actually in face-to-face situations where you're face-to-face with the other, with like another person, or in particularly people who are different than you, and you're tuning into their energy, and you're understanding, and you're curious about what hurts them and what helps them, and you're checking in with them to make sure that what you're doing is being received as love. I think that's the core basis of morality. And I think that when we try to make it a stupid fucking book, or, you know, these abstract rules that are true all the time and don't have any context, that's when morality becomes immoral. But when we ground it in the embodied experience, the embodied encounter, human to human, you know, divine being to divine being, that's when we have, I think, a better basis for morality than just thinking that you have to have some damn book or some deity tell you what to do.
I mean, human beings, believe it or not, behaviorally, we're quite simple. Behavior is repeated, that's rewarded. And human beings do things to gain pleasure and avoid pain, right? And so when that could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be something necessary. So morality can be something that's conditioned, either because something brings pleasure or it brings pain, because that changes the behavior. I think growing up, your community, religion, your instincts, which are derived sometimes from education and through your own personal experiences based on pleasure or pain and based on your behaviors, right? You learn event consequence, right? Sensations to different things. They're going to change how you behave and how you behave towards others. But there's something far deeper than that. Like, for example, I'm a bisexual woman and I'm a polyamorous person, and I have different types of relationships in my life. People who are in my life who I have different types of physical relationships with. Some of them are sexual, some of them are asexual. And so for example, technically I'm married, but I'm separated. And for a while last year and this year, I was seeing someone, and it was a loving, physical, emotional, intimate relationship. And when I first introduced this person to my children, right? My children have grown up very relaxed in the rules thing. Like, I don't spank them. They understand right from wrong from a safety point of view, right? We don't run into the street. We hold hands when we cross. We wear seatbelts. Like, we don't leave the stove on. Like, basic things to ensure survival, right? But when I told them, and I introduced this person, he's my romantic partner. Like, even my youngest daughter, she's almost 9. I mean, at the time she was 8, almost 8. She was very confused. She was like, well, I don't understand. As if human beings are supposed to have like one partner, be with one person. How can you be married and have a boyfriend, right? And so having those conversations with them, while not making it overly complicated, right? and allowing them not to feel shame, because I don't feel shame and it's not a shameful thing. These are choices that we made based on trauma, based on economics, based on the situation of our lives, to try not to create additional hardships for anyone. But she had this like weird moral compass, like it seemed wrong to her. And I mean, I would say we're religious, but we're not, we don't go to church. I grew up in the church. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, where we now have our first gay pastors, people who are allowed to serve, women are allowed to serve in the church now. Never happened when I was growing up. But we don't go to church every week. You know, we really aren't that involved anymore in our church. So the trickle down, there's very little, if any, trickle down trauma from religion in these children. I'm the first one in my family to open my life in that way. And I get a lot of flack for it, right? But my daughter had that weird, like, I was disturbing her moral values. You know, and then this person, you know, kind of became part of our life for a little while. And the more he was around, the more they bonded and kind of understood it. But I don't know, there is something that lingers in human beings, even though the majority of animals are not monogamous. At least for her, she already has like a set of morals as a human being, and she's 8. So I don't know where that comes from. You know, we're very proactive in our queer community. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I have a
Marissa,
thought.
I get what you're saying. I'm so sorry. Would you like to go?
Oh, no, after you.
Okay. Sorry. I get what you're saying, Marissa. My daughter has been around it with, you know, me being, you know, with women, but she was little at the time, so I don't know if she really remembers. But a few years ago, I was with a woman and she knew who she was, but she ended up not being happy about the situation. Marissa knows what it is. It ended up being physical and DV situation with that and got out of it. But my son, on the other hand, he had never seen me with a woman. And when he had first saw me with a woman, when I told him, he just wasn't too sure what to think or how to feel. And after a while, he finally grew to understand what it was. And after a while, and it had nothing to do with me, he finally realized who he actually was. And he was a little nervous about telling me. And when he told me, I just kind of laughed. I'm like, baby, why are you nervous to tell me? Hello, look who you're talking to. You have a gay mom. So there is no problem with that. But I get what you're saying. And sometimes it's hard to explain it to them because you don't want to confuse them. And even though they still have that confused look, and I always told them, you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I will be as open as honest and, you know, as I possibly can with you.
It sounds like you're leading by a good example, Rachel, and I'm glad to hear your thoughts on that. I know that you're welcome. I know, Shockie, you were looking to tie this a bit into the issues of we'll call them awful people who are attacking trans folk and deciding that they want to harass or intimidate or threaten people going into a drag show. I just wanted to say I was raised a Catholic. Thankfully, it took some years and some tragedies to come into my life to realize that atheism is something that is much more sensible perspective. And I see these posts on Facebook. I see them a lot that say that generally are sort of meme-ified images that say things along the lines of, these are paraphrases, Jesus never said anything about trans folk, or there's nothing in the Bible that is, you know, read your Bible, it's got nothing to do with drag shows. And I think a lot of these memes that people are sharing are kind of wasted efforts, because for me, you're agreeing with the opponent's premise that God even exists. You're agreeing that there even was a Jesus. that you're agreeing with their established premises, which I think is just a bogus mindset. I don't know why people are agreeing on that, and you don't need to, because it's not necessary. People ought to be able to do what they want, and tying it to spirituality or religion, and even if you're going to tackle the opponent by trying to take their background, their spirituality, and turn it against them, is never going to work, because they're just simply going to sit in a position to say, well, you just don't understand. You don't understand the scriptures. For me personally, as an atheist, I don't care about the scriptures. This is America. This is the country that has the First Amendment. This is the country that has a great legacy of freedom. And if people don't like that trans folk exist, if people don't like that there are drag shows, which I don't have much skin in that game anyway. I don't really think about it one way or another too often. But if people don't like those things, well, then they can either love America or they can leave it. I'll be happy to take what the old conservatives said in the 60s, when the conservatives would say to anti-war protesters, well, you don't love it? If you don't like it, leave it. Love America or leave it. And I think that's what people ought to be saying to these far-right lunatrons who attack trans folk. They should say to them, you get the hell out of my country, because this is America. This isn't some country that doesn't have the First Amendment. This is America. And if you don't like that people have rights, then you need to leave America.
So yes, I was trying to tie it in with it. That was why I asked the question of morality, because a lot of Americans have found their morality through religion, right? And as much as we like to say that there's a separation of church and state, the point that we're in right now, it shows there's a bunch of different religions, a bunch of different ideologies so those moralities are clashing, right? What one person thinks is moral, the next person doesn't. And that's where we're getting these battles that we're getting into in the government. But that being said, I'm going to throw some stats at you guys before I get to my next question. So in the year 2023, there are 492 bills being looked over in different states, in 47 states, 26 which have passed that are anti-LGBTQ, 422 that are still active, and 44 that failed. Okay. I won't be that person, but if you look up the amount of gun laws that are going through legislation, it is nowhere near that number. The suicide rate, however, among transgender individuals, if we were to look in the United States, is 41% have attempted suicide at least once in their life. If we look outside of the United States, in places like India, it is about 31%, with at least 50 of them attempting suicide at least once before they are 20 years old. More than 1 in 3 trans teens, so 37%, report being sexually assaulted when they were forced to use restrooms that didn't align with their gender. So with that being said, because a lot of these laws are using the guise of children's safety to be passed, realistically, the main one, or not the main one, the most recent, Tennessee, has a bathroom ban that is going through. I think it has been repealed by help of the ACLU, but it was a bathroom bill that you have to use the bathroom of your born sex rather than your gender. So what do we do? What is the correct line of action that we take to ensure children's safety and still allow for humanity, knowing this information?
Well, I mean, part of it is understanding that, it's like transgender people, like we've always been boogeymen, man, before I knew I was trans, just as an autistic kid, I've always been a boogeyman for bougie white, women, basically. you know, who are like cishet. And so, you know, I used to be scary just because I was autistic, and now I'm scary because, you know, I wear dresses sometimes, you know. But the man who molested me in my church he was a straight white man, you know, and he was completely conservative, completely, you know, like being different or anything like that. Did I freeze again? Okay.
You just sound
So,
robotic. That's why we were laughing.
Oh, I went robotic. Okay, because I was talking about my sexual trauma and everyone was laughing. Oh God. I mean, I'm used to it, so it doesn't faze me. But like, yeah. I mean, it's like children's safety has nothing to do with gender difference. You know, it's like, I mean, if we want to pass children's safety laws, let's start talking about, you know, like the child pornography that is the like Little Miss Tierra, you know, industry. You know, like let's deal with that. You know, and actually, and start to ask questions about like, at what age should, you know, little girls be doing beauty pageants? You know, and what kind of, you know, because there's hypersexualization that's happening, and it's, you know, it's just so obvious what's going on, because like, you know, the people that are freaking out about drag queen story hour, you know, they have their little girls in beauty pageants, you know, where they're, you know, dressing. Yeah, transference of adult insecurities, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, weird is not dangerous. You know, I literally made a song about this. Like, people who are strange are not unsafe. You know, that's the name of my song. And it's true. Like, just because you're strange, just because you're different, doesn't mean you're unsafe. And this has been a common problem throughout human history. The idea that if someone is strange and different, that they're scary and unsafe. And that's not true. The unsafe people are people who the narcissist, you know, who's in charge, and likes to control others. You know, in my song, I say, what normally does harm is normal people moralizing norms, you know, and that's what does harm, you know, like the actual harm in terms of people being traumatized, you know, and it's, yeah. So, you know, and basically the pattern is that the narcissists who have power use strange people as scapegoats in order to maintain their power. You know, and then they continue to do harm. They continue to control people, and that's the cycle. And it's bullshit. And that's why people who are, you know, different, people who are odd and weird and queer like me, like, it's our job to overthrow the bullshit. Oops, I said something explicit again.
That's okay. So
I'd like to
Justin-
hear from Justin. We haven't included him yet in his point of view. Sorry, Shockie.
Justin, actually, I had something specific I want to talk to you. So of those 47, or I'm sorry, those bills that are going through, I've seen a good number of them are looking as transgender affirming care as medical malpractice. And I know the Hippocratic Oath is a thing, like if someone is hurting, you have to help them, blah, 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 blah. And with your medical background, where do you, I don't want, you know, not necessarily where you stand on that, but how do you make sense of that? Like, agree, disagree? Like, can I hear your side on that?
Yeah, it definitely makes it challenging as a healthcare professional. You know, not only some of the like hormone blocking therapy, but looking like in West Virginia where they're, you know, as a healthcare professional, you definitely want to, you know, address a lot of the depression, psychosocial needs, you know, making sure they have their basic needs met. But not only we're talking about medications and access to care, but a lot of healthcare organizations are religiously affiliated. So, you know, if these people are getting kicked out of their homes, they're going to homeless shelters that are also taxpayer funded, you know, they can turn them away based on these laws. So if you're someone that works in like The homeless shelter, and you're accessing care, you kind of are cut off there. So it really impedes a lot of the access to these individuals to get just simple needs met.
Which side of, so, because they're calling it medical malpractice, altering children under the age of 18, which you can have your own thoughts on that. But from a medical
Well, I
point
mean,
of
that's
view,
kind of the turning point, right? I mean, after you start getting to 18, 20, it's kind of, you're kind of having to catch the end of the tail, right? Like it's already, it's almost too late. So I think that's the kind of the purpose of the law. They're trying to kind of make those decisions for those kids. So I think it's important to, I mean, if the parents are involved, you know, to kind of have those decisions early on, because those kids already kind of know where they're leaning, if they have a supportive family, or even if they don't. Like if you're a healthcare professional and now these laws are in place, you can't have that open communication with that patient and start doing treatment, because now you're at risk, kind of like the abortion laws, right? It's kind of like, are we on the fence? What day is it? Like what's going on? And it really impedes our care. And which side, I'm definitely for it. Like I would want to have access to care and be able to catch these kids earlier on versus having to wait just because a law is passed saying that they have to wait till they're 18 to make these decisions on their own, which is absurd.
My 2 cents, for whatever it's worth, is very quick and very short. I think that as a society, our obligation is to our children. Whether we have children or not, as a society collectively, our obligation is to the children, to keep them alive, number one, and to make sure that they have a good quality of life, number two. That means making sure that they're fed, that they're housed, that they're safe, that they're not abused, that they're, if they have mental health needs, physical, medical needs, that they're being cared for. And so many trans kids choose to end their life because their needs are not being met. And so at least the support around their needs is not even being heard. So we need to make sure, number one, we're helping to save their life. And number two, that we are helping their quality of care and their quality of life.
Yeah, and to kind of touch base on that, like, you know, are we ensuring, like, if they can't even come to the, you know, their practitioner, you know, they have guidance counselors that are educated in the LGBTQ space, or do they know how to even start having that conversation so then they can, you know, confidently know to get that access to care? Because I feel like, you know, there's definitely a whole process in place, and we're definitely backspacing or kind of backtracking everything, all the progress that we made.
They
Yeah, and
definitely
like,
do need
so
a.
for
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
for me as a trans person, like, I mean, I have gone through so much therapy in my life because of how hard my father tried to make me masculine, you know, when I was a kid, and how that all got internalized into all of this, you know, anxiety, all these layers of anxiety that I had that I've only very recently been able to break out of, you know, as part of my coming out process. And it's like when I look at home movies of me when I was 7, I am finally the same person that I was when I was 7. Like I wasn't that person for, you know, 38 years, you know. I mean, you know, like I guess I started my kind of journey of coming back to who I was as a kid, you know, when I was about 40. But like the reason my name is Starchild is because that's the name I gave myself in a pre-internet chat room in 1989 when I didn't want to be a boy or a girl on the internet. And I had a place where I could just be a Starchild, not and have no one know like what my gender was, you know. And that was before there was even a word. The word transgender didn't even exist then. You know, it was like there were people who had sex changes, but like there wasn't a concept that, you know, gender was separable from anatomy, you know. And I just knew that I was different, you know. And there's a lot of different ways you can understand that. I mean, you know, my mom doesn't understand it, and so I'm like, well, I just have a strong feminine side, you know, and I'm okay with telling her that, you know. I mean, I use they, them pronouns because I'm in solidarity with the kids. I've had multiple students who committed suicide, who are very close to me. And so it's like, this is so like, I'm just so irate, at the way that these assholes are using us as scapegoats to get votes, calculation. We don't actually pose a threat. It's that we're convenient scapegoats that allow the actual creepy people to be in charge, and to continue winning votes and to keep, as long as you keep people afraid, then you can create this kind of culture where you keep political power, and it's just garbage. And so like the way that I'm dealing with this, like I went on William and Mary's campus with a rainbow dress and my Bluetooth speaker, and I had a dance party on Friday, at my local college. And I'm just going to keep on doing that, and I don't even care anymore, like if I lived in the state of Tennessee, I could have been arrested for doing that. Like, cause it was technically speaking, I guess, a drag show or something like that, but I'm just like, screw it, I'm going to be myself. And when I'm my full self, people respond to me a lot better. Like I get a lot better vibe from people when I'm actually myself. And not the anxious white man that I was for, decades of my life, and it's like when you let people be authentic, because that's what this is about. This is about authenticity. This is about being ourselves, and it's completely intersects with just our identity as poets too, it's just about, that's all that I think that's my queer agenda is authenticity. I just want people to be able to be themselves and understand and and if there's someone who wants to have a more complicated understanding of gender than like the labels that we currently have, great. Let's make it more nuanced. Let's make it more weird than it already is. Let's make it different. That's okay. It doesn't have to be. I mean, that's the thing in the queer community. Like, I'm the bad queer who doesn't like to follow the standardized categories. Because I feel like if you're queer, then you're against standardization. Period.
And so thank you for sharing your personal experience. I think that, because again, we were talking about keeping children safe, and you saying like how you were when you were 7. It's interesting. I was watching this thing on Netflix about Japan, which they have their own problems clearly, but it was talking about the difference in cultures. So at the age of like say 4 or 5, these children are able to get on a bus or a train and take themselves to school on their own. And at a certain age, they have to wear like a yellow beanie to let the community know, like, I'm young, I may need help. And they have this belief of the community raises the child, which is something that we used to have. We used to have that, the neighborhood is the family. Whereas now America has turned to this real individualistic point of view. And I asked myself, because we couldn't even do that if we wanted to here, right? You can't let your 5-year-old out on their own because you can't trust the people around you. And the question is, when did we get to that point? Like where, because we're so focused on children's safety, but more and more our children are not safe, right? With everything going on, you see, the school shootings, you see sexual assault on a rise, suicide on a rise. It perplexes me where children's safety comes in, where if we're the ones championing for it, that we are the country with the least amount of it, regardless of if it's a drag show or not. Rachel, I see you unmuted. Did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yes, it's going, with the children, they need us. They need us to be there for them. They need us to confide in. They need us to be strong for them. They need that strength from us. And they most definitely need us to fight for them so that they can be their true authentic selves, so that they don't have to grow up to be scared. And Starchild, I am so happy that you're finally able to be who you want to be and be comfortable within yourself.
Right. And it kind of goes back to that individualized care. I mean, if you a parent now and you have a transgender child, like with all these changes going on, like, if you initially started kind of introducing this into their lifestyle and into their school, and now you're having to backtrack, how are you, how are you going to this process or getting the medical care, and now you're having to go backwards, it's definitely a challenging time. I mean, you're still giving them support, but it definitely challenges us, not only, as a medical practitioner, but just, into the school systems and into the counselors and then the family. And it's a very challenging process.
Right. And Teresa put in the notes that it's just basic human rights. We're just fighting for basic human rights. And that's something that's taught in school, right? Human rights. And then they're trying so hard to take the history behind why certain people don't have rights out of the schools. It's just interesting that Marissa said earlier that power has to do with education. Sorry, I got to scroll up a little bit. Yeah, rights, education, and access. And that's exactly the areas that they are hitting with these anti-LGBTQ laws. Started with education, and now it's becoming an issue with access. Access to, what bathrooms they can use, what venues they're allowed to be in. Changing it so that drag, which is separate from transgenderism, is no longer, it's considered adult. It's the B word. Or erotic poet.
Well, and see, what's so crazy about that, drag is just clowning. It's just being silly. It's wearing a silly.
I feel like every time he gets fired up, his mic's like, nah. Yes, Rich.
Should I wait a second for Starchild to get the signal clear?
I think he's working on it. He muted himself.
Okay. I just wanted to say, just from my perspective as a almost 55-year-old man who has a pretty good memory of how things once were, at least where I grew up. I'm hoping to see less tears in the eyes of people who are affected by these lunatrons who are trying to impact people's lives negatively in a country that's supposed to be free. This is America. This is not some podunk little ass. It angers me as somebody who, in some ways, in some respects, leans a little bit conservative, not much, but a little bit in some areas, that people are forgetting what country they're in. I think that people who are impacted by these anti-gay and anti-trans laws need to hit back so hard, whatever that looks like, that the people who are going after them, they need to be told it gets better. They get so desperate, sad, and despondent that they're the ones that need to be consoled. They should be made to be terrified to go out of their own home because of the anti-gay things that they say. They should be living in fear. That to me is what would be a really good picture to see. I just saw on Twitter, because I follow an organization on Twitter called Right Wing Watch. And there's a fellow who's some right-wing apparatchik named Floyd Brown. He's the founder of the Western Journal, whatever that is. And he said that right-wing Christians, this is a recent quote, must take back America by having their church literally take over their town. The quote was, every church should run their town. And there's a lot of churches in Albuquerque that are obsessive about just spamming social media with ads for their dumb mega churches, which I hold no brief for them, and I have no patience for them as an atheist, especially. And Marissa, I see your point about we can't become them, but at the same time, the time has passed for approaching them with a spirit of love, because they want to see gay people ended. And let's assume that America still exists in a year's time from now. I think that's a big assumption. But suppose America does still exist in 1 year. What's it going to look like if people don't start fighting back? And I don't mean arguing or back or making new and inventive signs based on memes. I mean fighting back. You know, these people feel empowered to go to town hall meetings or board of education meetings and harangue people who go there with quotes from the Bible, which I have no patience for that. I don't have patience for the Bible. I don't have patience for Jesus, Harold Christ. I don't have patience for any of these things that they think need to dominate America, because this is America. This isn't a theocracy.
So, sorry to talk a lot. Can y'all hear me? Am I okay? Okay, cool. So the only pushback I have, Rich, is that the whole evangelical identity is built on the idea of martyrdom. They want to have people persecute them because that's part of how they feel legitimate, is when they're being persecuted. And so my approach, like in the songs that I'm creating, literally, one of my good friends has an LGBT organization in Uganda. They just passed an anti-gay law where there's like literally a death penalty for, they call it aggravated homosexuality, which I think has to do with, like, I don't even know. So I feel like the way that we fight back is through art and through public spectacle that is lighthearted and playful. So for instance, I made a song called "The Founding Fathers Dressed Like Drag Queens," because the Founding Fathers did dress like drag queens. You know, they wore makeup and wigs, and they were very effeminate compared to the standards of masculinity for today. Back in the day, like Thomas Jefferson was very femme, and just because the standards for gender were very different in the, a dandy, like Yankee Doodle Dandy, the song Yankee Doodle Dandy. And y'all, is my audio still good? Okay. So a dandy is basically a queer, like that word dandy means like a man who is light in the loafers. So like that song that we sing, that's like the patriotic Yankee Doodle went to town, blah, blah, blah. That's about a man who is light in the loafers. It was originally an insult that the British said about the American soldiers. And then the American soldiers took it on and trolled the British by saying, yeah, we're dandies, so what? Like, that's what's so amazing about our history, is there's all this queerness that is hidden underneath the surface. And then, these ahistorical, idiots try to turn our legacy into this kind of whitewashed, white evangelical, like it's always been the same way. No, it hasn't. I mean, that's the other thing. The founding fathers, like Rich, you're talking about, atheism and whatnot. Like the founding fathers were deists. God was just a conceptual idea. Oh, there was a billboard that I just drove past that said, "God loves trans kids." So, amen. But I don't know what it means. Maybe it's like right-wing propaganda, like God just trying to save trans kids from being trans or something. I have no idea. But anyway, I will sign off.
All right. So I'm definitely going to get a t-shirt that says Thomas Jefferson was a bottom. Those will be for sale on my website soon.
He was totally a bottom. Absolutely a bottom.
Oh, he was a terrible guy. Regardless, he was a terrible guy.
George was the top, man. George was the top.
All right. Can we get this podcast off the ground before it gets canceled, please? Okay. But we are coming to the end of our hour here, and I want to give everyone a chance to say their final statements. I do want to, for those listening, obviously, this is associated with a poetry anthology. And if you are so inclined, we'd like you to write about what revolution means to you, right? Rich was definitely getting into that. Like, how do we fight back? How do we change it? How do we make the good guys win in the end? And I think that would be a great prompt, right? Just write what revolution means to you. And feel free to share it on our page. The word is right. Either, put it on IG and tag the word is right, or on our Facebook. Tag us on Facebook. We love to see what you come up with. That being said, I appreciate you guys all coming out, and I want to hear your closing statements as to say, this isn't a courtroom, but whatever you guys have to say on our topic. We'll go around the room. We'll start with Rachel.
So what we spoke about today, I believe it's something that we all need to keep fighting for, so that they can continue to be who themselves, and not be scared to go out. We need to fight for them to, just be themselves and do what we can to turn these laws around, is what I'm trying to say. Because whether it be, them not being who they be able to be who they are, and, with the medical healthcare, they need to be able to feel comfortable. The doctors and such need to be able to say, hey, yes, I will take this case. I will take this patient. A lot of therapists out there as well. I know there are some, my son and I, we both have wonderful therapists that are accepting of it. And I believe that we need more therapists like that. So I think that we just need to keep fighting for everyone, every one of us, and every trans child and adult to just keep being who they are. We need to get these laws changed.
All right, thank you. Rich, you're up.
I'll say that for whatever it might be worth, as the nearly over a half a century old straight white guy, his presence in the room, I will say that I think that if a civil war happens, I know what side I'm on. I think that these people who are trying to make life miserable for trans folk and for gay folk, they're the ones that need to be made miserable. They need to be made sad and fearful, and so much so that they need to be told it gets better. I don't personally, for me, I don't take a playful approach to it. I think that because I personally think I don't think it's a game. I think people's lives, trans folks' lives, gay folks' lives, they matter. And the lives of those who go to the town halls with biblical quote signs railing against gay folk and trans folk, their lives don't matter.
Thank you. Justin.
I think it's always important just to be a good role model, just of kindness and inclusion. I think it's important to all of us to remember to be to vote and to try to involve ourselves, monthly in local and state, any kind of political things that are going on, and especially in the communities, just to show our support. Because I myself, sometimes get busy and caught up, but I'm, trying to make more of that purposeful meaning, just to be there and show my presence, and then also try to bring people along, just so that word spreads. So we have support. A lot of people, don't kind of aren't aware of the things that are happening locally and in our state. So I think just bringing people and just reminding them that small things matter.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the topic today of the legislation going through. If the government acts as it's supposed to, representation is the biggest thing. So getting out and voting, and having the people who are representing you represent your rights is a big thing. So thank you. Matriarch, what you got to say?
Well, I was going to see if Terry Rose had anything she wanted to interject before I give a closing thing. Terry Rose, did you want to add anything?
I think she said she was stepping away, which is why I didn't say anything.
Okay. It's super simple. Help, don't hurt. Like, I think that philosophy is, if I'm skipping, I might be, because of course one time, like, I'm gonna do a closing thing. But anyways, you know, help first. Care. Just care a little bit. You don't have to care a lot, but just care a little bit about someone else and what they need to get better and help. We absolutely need to vote. If you don't know, ask. If you're curious about the trans community, about the gay community, ask. If you're afraid of something, that just really means you don't understand it and you need to ask, educate yourself, go to open mics, go online, you know, read, feed your brain so you can be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You know, I think if we start learning about each other, learning about the communities that we live in, especially for straight people who maybe don't have gay friends or they don't have any experience in the gay community, don't go get that one trophy gay friend so you can say you're woke and shit. Like, that's not the answer. That's not the solution. You can't say that you're an ally or that you're a friend unless you're practicing helping, not hurting those in the gay community. So please be part of the solution. Please, you matter. Everyone matters. If you're struggling, speak up. But let's make this a better place for tomorrow. And like Rich said, you know, fight the good fight. Listen to your instinct, your intuition, and just do something good for someone.
Yeah, like purchasing the Out Loud
So-
lounge. No, I'm just kidding. But
just really quick, just to throw it out. Yeah. So like, if you want to support transgender people, then support trans art. Like, you know, if we're trying to promote our shit, then help us. You know, like if we get on Facebook with our, you know, music videos or whatever, and you see some trans person and they got like 2 views or whatever, you know, you can share that. You know, like you know, if you want to be an ally, help us promote, help us be visible, you know. So that's it.
Starchild, you should come on here. You should do a monthly an art show where you're teaching art or talking about art. Oh my God, let's get David, Michelangelo's David on the screen, right? Like, if anyone wants to do like a special, like some type of art show, whether it's an art study, an art history, or a performance art, or a physical art, or maybe you're doing art together, maybe it's a tutorial or something. If you want to do that, you know, Starchild, let me know, because we have slots available for shows.
I was using art in the more expansive sense. I suck at visual art, but like more like music / poetry / drag, you know, performance, you know, like drama kind of stuff.
But you're right. Support the trans
But I'm
art.
totally down. I'm totally down to get some more visibility, like whatever space. When you got a time slot, we can figure it out. Because that's
Okay,
where I am now. I was kind of I was in hiding for a little while, but now I'm ready to step out.
All right, we'll talk for sure.
and we'll talk about the Out Loud anthology. This is me keep trying to end the show, guys. It's not me just trying to sell the book. I'm telling you, it is a great collection. It is amazing. Check out the Red or Green. Check out The Word Is Right on Facebook. Meet with our artists, support artists. And thank you for joining today.